Hi friends, in this video we will be discussing the topic Pramanas. This is one of the most important topics which is associated with Indian logic. And before moving to the details of Pramanas, we have to first know some of the factors that are involved in any type of knowledge. So, Pramana is basically a term that is associated with knowledge. So, before moving to the details of Pramana, we will be just looking at these four terms or these four factors that are involved or that are associated with any kind of knowledge. So, the first term or the first factor is Pramata, which can be called as a subject who knows. Who is the person who is knowing this particular thing? The person or the subject who knows can be called as Pramata. And when then we have Prameya, which is actually the object of knowledge. What are we knowing about? What is the content of the knowledge? That is Prameya. So, Pramata, the subject who knows. Then we have Prameya, the object of knowledge. What are we knowing about? And then we have Pramana, which is basically the means of valid knowledge. So, Pramana is the means of valid knowledge, and finally you have Prama, the resultant of valid knowledge. We have Prama and Aprama. So, Prama is valid knowledge and Aprama is invalid knowledge. Okay. So, these are four important factors that are associated with any type of knowledge, and when we consider NET exam, this Pramana is an area which is very relevant, which is very important from NET point of view. So, now we will be looking at this particular term, this particular factor that is associated with knowledge in detail. So, as we have mentioned earlier, Pramana is basically the means of valid knowledge. So, it can be called as the means through which we are obtaining accurate and valid knowledge about the world. So, Pramana is a factor that is associated with knowledge, and we said that it is the means through which we are getting knowledge, and it can be called as the means from which we are obtaining accurate and valid knowledge about the world. And if Pramana can be called as the valid source of knowledge, it serves as one of the key concepts that is associated with Indian epistemology. So, epistemology is a term that is associated with knowledge, and it is the study of knowledge. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, and this Pramana can be considered as a key concept that is associated with Indian epistemology. So, when we consider this Pramana, we have 6 different types of Pramanas or 6 different sources or means of valid knowledge, which includes Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Anupalatti and Arthapati. So, these are the 6 Pramanas that we need to study under this particular area. So, as I have already mentioned, Pramanas are the valid sources. So, these are the 6 important valid sources from which we will be getting accurate and valid knowledge about the world. So, now we will be looking at each of these Pramanas in detail. So, the first Pramana that we are going to discuss is Pratyaksha, which can be translated as perception, and this perception or Pratyaksha means the knowledge that we are perceiving through our senses, the knowledge that is perceptible to us, the things that are perceptible to the eyes or the things that are visible. So, this type of knowledge is what we are getting directly through our senses, the things that we are directly perceiving, that can be called as Pratyaksha or perception. And there are certain categorizations that comes under Pratyaksha. So, the first categorization is of the 2 different kinds of Pratyaksha. When we consider the 2 types of or 2 kinds of Pratyaksha, we have direct perception as well as remembered perception, and this direct perception can be called as Anubhava and remembered perception can be called as Smriti. So, what is direct perception or Anubhava? The things that we are directly perceiving, the things that we are understanding directly through our senses, that can be called as Anubhava. And then we have another kind of perception or Pratyaksha that can be called as Smriti, which is the remembered perception. The things that are in our mind, the things that we have experienced in the past and that are there in our mind, in our memory, and that kind of perception can be called as smriti, the remembered perception. The next type of categorization that comes under this particular pramana, which is pratiksha, is nirvikalpaka and savikalpaka, and nirvikalpaka means indiscriminate perception, indiscriminate perception. So, what happens in nirvikalpaka or indiscriminate perception? The objects are perceived without its distinguishing features. We are just understanding things, we are just perceiving things, but we are not bothered about its unique features or the distinguishing factors that makes a particular thing different from others. We are just perceiving, okay, this is this thing, that is all. We are not going into the details how this thing is different from others, we are not bothered about that aspects. So, that is indiscriminate perception. So, we are perceiving everything without any kind of discrimination. So, that is indiscriminate perception, that can be called as nirvikalpaka. And then we have discriminate perception, which can be called as savikalpaka. So, what happens in savikalpaka? The distinguishing features are both observed and recognized. So, under savikalpaka or under discriminate perception, what we are doing, we will be focusing on the features of the things that we are perceiving. We are focusing on the features, how this particular thing is different from others. So, we are going into the details, the concepts that are behind the things that we are perceiving. So, in nirvikalpaka or indiscriminate perception, we are not bothered about that aspects, we are not bothered about the distinguishing features of each and everything that we are perceiving. We are just perceiving things, okay, there is something like this exists, that is all. That is nirvikalpaka or indiscriminate perception. Then we have discriminate perception, which can be called as savikalpaka, in which we will be focusing on the distinguishing features of each and everything that we are perceiving. We will be focusing on the features that makes a particular thing different from others. We will be observing it and also we will be recognizing it. Another type of categorization that comes under pratiksha or perception is of laukika and alaukika. So, perception can be divided again into two categories. We have laukika. So, laukika means the ordinary knowledge or the ordinary perception. So, it is about the things that we are perceiving about the world, the things that we are seeing around us, the very direct kind of perceptions that are laukika, ordinary knowledge, and then we have alaukika, which can be called as extraordinary perception. So, under this extraordinary perception or alaukika, we have three different categories. In alaukika, we have samani lakshana at the first place, which can be called as the perception of classes. So, what is this samani lakshana? So, I will just give you an example so that this idea will be more clearer for you. So, if you are introduced to a pot, let us consider a pot as an example. So, when you are seeing a pot, you will be focusing on the features of the pot. What is the shape of a pot? How can you recognize a pot, and what are the features that are associated with a pot? What are the uses of a pot? And you will be focusing on many aspects that are associated with this particular pot. But when you are focusing on a single pot, what you are getting, the ideas that you are getting is about the pots that are there in the entire category, right. That means this particular pot actually represents the entire class of pots. So, what are things that you are getting, the ideas that you are getting from this particular pot can be associated with any pot that you will be seeing in the future, or the features that you are perceiving from this particular pot can be associated with all the pot that is around this world. So, that is samani lakshana, perception of classes, the things, the ideas that you are getting from a single object is actually representing the features of the entire class. That is the idea. So, when you are seeing a single pot and when you are recognizing the features of a single pot, that feature is actually, you are just seeing a single pot, but the features that you are obtaining, the features, the ideas that you are getting from that single pot actually represents the features of the entire class of pots. So, that is Samanya Lakshana. And then we have Jnana Lakshana, which can be called as complication. So, what happens here? I will just give you another example. When you are seeing an ice, okay, when you are seeing an ice, I-C-E, ice. So, when you are seeing an ice, you will be just seeing it there, but you can, without touching it, you can say that that ice looks cold, okay. That means you are just seeing the ice, you are not going and touching it, you just seeing it, but from that single perception, from that single seeing, you are saying that that ice is cold. Or when you see a stone that is there in the floor or in the ground, you does not have to go and touch it and to identify that that particular stone is hard. With this single look, you can understand that the stone is hard, right. That means you are just seeing an object, but with that perception you are getting some other ideas as well. You are seeing an ice, you are not just touching it, because this coldness can be only understood when we are touching it, right. But what happens is when you are at the single moment, when you are seeing it in itself, you identify that the ice is cold. How can you say that? Because of your experiences, you know that the ice is always cold, the stone is always hard, you do not have to go and touch it. You can just see it and you can understand that, okay, this is ice and this is cold, and this is stone, this is hard, so I have to make sure that I am not stumbling on that particular stone. So, that kind of an idea. You are just seeing it, but from that seeing, that perception itself, we are getting more ideas about the object. We do not have to go and touch an ice, or we do not have to go and touch a stone to identify that the ice is cold and the stone is hard. We know it already. When you are seeing it, at that moment itself you say that, okay, this ice looks cold or this stone looks hard. So, that is complication or Jnana Lakshana. So, the third category that comes under Alaukika or extraordinary perception is Yogaca, which can be translated as intuition. So, Yogaca is basically the intuitions that we are getting about a world that is outside what we are perceiving. So, the things that these yogis and all that are perceiving can be called as intuitions or Yogaca. So, they are thinking about this something metaphysical, transcendental things that are above this world, right. So, that is Yogaca or intuition. So, these are three different categorizations that we can study under perception or pratiksha. Now, we are moving towards the next type of pramana, that is Anumana, which can be translated as inference. So, when we consider Anumana, this Anumana is very important from net point of view. We have to know the structure of Anumana, the various terms, the elements that are associated with Anumana, and the different types of Anumana. We have various categories in which we can figure out various types of Anumana. So, this is a very important point from net point of view. So, now for the time being we will be just looking at a general idea of Anumana, and we will be separately looking at this particular session in one of our videos. So, what is Anumana or inference? This is the information that we are perceiving through deduction. So, that means the information, every information cannot be received directly, or we cannot perceive every information, right. So, for that we at times we will be getting information's knowledge by the use of deduction. We will be deducing and we will be inferring certain conclusions or certain informations. So, the thing is, information and pratiksha, we said that perception is basically we are perceiving things directly, we are seeing and understanding things, that is pratiksha or perception. But the problem is information is not received as it is perceived, or we cannot receive this information as it is perceived. So, for that what we have to do is we have to deduce the things that we are perceiving, and from that we have to come to certain inferences. So, you have to understand that logic or that sequence in this. We will be perceiving several things, but we cannot get information from what we have received through our perceptions directly at times. So, what we will do, from what we have perceived we will be deducing, we will be doing deduction, and we will be coming to an inference. So, that will give you a final information or a final set of knowledge. So, that is Anumana or inference. We will be looking at this particular area in detail in one of our videos. So, now we will be moving to the next type of Pramana, that is Upamana. So, Upamana is basically a Sanskrit word which can be translated as comparison or resemblance in English. So, comparison and resemblance. We will be comparing things and we will be identifying the resemblance between things, and then from that we will be acquiring knowledge, that is Upamana. So, what happens in Upamana? Upamana is association of something previously unknown by virtue of its similarity to something that is known. Okay. So, what happens in Upamana? We will be comparing the things that we know to the things that we are unknown to, and then we will be trying to understand the newly coming things or the new unknown things. That is Upamana. We will be comparing things to each other, and from that comparison we will be getting knowledge. There are certain things which are unknown to us. So, we will be comparing the things that we know to that unknown things, and we will be trying to understand those ideas. That is Upamana, that is comparison or resemblance. Okay. So, please do remember this particular word, comparison or resemblance. That is the word or the translation of the Sanskrit word Upamana. So, we will be comparing things to each other, and then we will be understanding things. We will be comparing the things we know to unknown things, and then we will be trying to understand the unknown things. That is Upamana. Now, we are moving to the next type, that is Shabda, which can be translated as verbal testimony. So, this verbal testimony or Shabda is the knowledge that we are obtaining through words. This knowledge can either be written or oral. Okay. And one of the most important thing that we have to notice or we have to understand when it comes to Shabda is that this knowledge, as we have already said, the knowledge should be derived from words. The knowledge that we are deriving from words can be called as Shabda or verbal testimony. It can be in two forms, it can be either written or oral, but anyway this has to come from an authentic source or a trustworthy person. That is very important. So, Shabda is verbal testimony, and this verbal testimony is considered as a knowledge, and it can be of two different types. It can be in the form of written, it can be in written format, or we can pursue this type of knowledge, the knowledge through words orally as well. But the point is, the source should be authentic. The source should be authentic, or in other words, the person from which or from whom we are getting this idea should be a trustworthy person who can be called as Apta. So, if you are referring a book to know about something, or if you are going and asking someone about a particular thing. So, the ideas that we are getting from books, journals or different references, that can be called as Shabda or verbal testimony. So, when we consider this Shabda or verbal testimony, one of the most important ideas that is associated with Shabda or verbal testimony is given here. So, under Nyaya philosophy, when we consider Nyaya philosophy, we are having a sequential order of a comprehensible sentence. So, what is the order of a comprehensible sentence, or what are the elements that are associated, or what are the factors that are associated with a comprehensible or a meaningful sentence? So, we already said Shabda is verbal testimony, the knowledge that we are getting through words. It can either in the form of writing, written format, or we can obtain it through oral transmissions. But anyway, in Nyaya philosophy, they are giving you a sequential order of a comprehensible or a meaningful sentence. So, this is a very important thing that we have to understand, because we had get questions from this part as well. So, I have given you the sequential order of a comprehensible sentence in Nyaya philosophy, which includes Akanksha, which can be called as expectancy, Yogyata, which can be called as consistency, Asati or Sannidhi, which can be called as contiguity, and finally Tatparya, knowledge of the purport. So, what is Akanksha or expectancy? So, when we consider a sentence is comprised of various terms or various words. But if you consider this sentence, we can say that each word in a sentence is having a mutual need of another word. That means a word in itself, if it stands alone, it cannot give you a meaningful sentence. A word has to be associated with other words so that it can make a proper sentence. If I just say you bring, if I say you like bring something, or not like, if I just use the word bring, it cannot give you any kind of meaning. Then you will be asking me what I have to bring, right? That means the term bring needs another term with it so that they can together make a meaningful sentence. So if I say bring that bottle, that makes sense, right? Because bring as a word is in a mutual need of another word so that they can together form a meaningful sentence. Bring cannot in itself make a sentence. Bring a bottle. So that is a sentence right now, right? So that is the idea, akanksha or expectancy. Each word in a sentence is in a mutual need of another word in order to make a complete, meaningful, comprehensible sentence. That is akanksha or expectancy. Then we have yogyata, which can be called as consistency. So the thing is, each term, each word has it has to be connected with other words to make a proper sentence, and also these words should have some kind of a relationship to each other. We cannot make we cannot just put whatever words together and make a comprehensible sentence, or in order to make a meaningful comprehensible sentence, we have to choose appropriate words. We have to connect appropriate words so that it together makes a proper sentence, a meaningful sentence. That is consistency. So the first thing is, each word requires another words to make a comprehensible sentence. We have to associate these words together to form a comprehensible sentence. That is first thing, akanksha or expectancy, the mutual need of words in a sentence. And then yogyata, consistency, that means, as we have already said, each word requires another word with it to make a comprehensible sentence, but we have to choose the appropriate words and we have to connect them together so that they can together make a comprehensible, meaningful sentence. Then we have asati or sanidhi, which is contiguity. So there is a continuity in our sentence, then only it will make any sense to the listener. So if you are writing something, there should be a flow of thought, right? There is a continuity in what we are writing or what we are saying. That is asati or sanidhi. Then only we can say that, okay, this particular sentence is comprehensible, this particular sentence is meaningful. That is sanidhi, asati or sanidhi. So the next one is tatparya, which can be defined as a knowledge of the purport. So when we are introducing or when we are saying a comprehensible sentence or a meaningful sentence, it should contain something to convey to the listener, right? So it should contain an intended meaning or a knowledge of the purpose. It should contain a purpose, a knowledge of the purpose. So that is tatparya. And now we are moving to the next pramana, that is Pardi, which can be also termed as presumption or implication. So these are the two terms to which we can translate the term Pardi. Pardi means presumption or implication, and Pardi refers to the ways in which we are deriving knowledge from a set of circumstances. So from the set of circumstances or from the set of events that are within our hands, we have to derive knowledge. Why? That is the question. So Pardi recognized that all information is not immediately accessible. All the informations are not immediately accessible. So at times we have to derive knowledge from the set of circumstances or the set of events that we have within our hands. So that is what Pardi recognizes, and it says that as information is not always immediately accessible, we have to use postulations and presumptions in order to gain valid knowledge. So this is also considered as a proper it is also considered as a proper means to invalid knowledge. As I have already mentioned, Pardi recognizes that all informations are not immediately accessible. So, at times we have to derive knowledge or information from the set of circumstances that we have at the hand, and this derivation of knowledge from the set of circumstances can be possible through the use of postulations and presumptions. So, some examples will make you this idea more clearer. That means using the data of the sunrise times, if we are coming to a point that okay, what is the time in which the sun will rise tomorrow. So, using the data that we have about sunrise timings, that is basically the timings in which the sun rises in the previous days. So, using that data of sunrise timings, if we are saying that tomorrow the sun will rise at this particular time, so that is Pardi. We are not known to the time as it is not directly accessible to us, but what we have at our hand is the sunrise timings of the previous days. On the basis of that information, we are presupposing or we are postulating that okay, the next day this will be the time in which the sun will rise. Or in other words, if we are making a comment on the dietary habits of a person based on his weight and his eating habits, it is again an example of Pardi. So, please do remember that Pardi is basically it is a source of knowledge in which we are deriving informations from the set of circumstances that we have at our hand, and we will be using postulation and presumption in order to gain proper knowledge in Pardi. So, the next type of pramana is anupalapti, which can be translated as non-apprehension or non-perception. So, this anupalapti is the way in which we are perceiving the absence of something. So, it says that something that does not exist cannot be perceived through our senses. When we discussed about pratyaksha or perception, we said that it is the source, it is a source of knowledge in which we are perceiving things that are present in front of us. We are perceiving it through our eyes, or we are perceiving those things that are visible. So, that was pratyaksha or perception. But when we consider anupalapti, it says that something that does not exist cannot be perceived through our senses. So, in order to understand the absence of something, we need some other source of knowledge, and anupalapti is that particular kind of knowledge or that particular means to valid knowledge in which we are recognizing the absence of something. So, that is anupalapti or non-apprehension, or we can also call it as non-perception. So, now we are moving to a few questions that were asked from this particular area in the previous exams. So, we have discussed 6 different pramanas, and the first question is from June 2020. What is the sequential order of a comprehensive sentence in Nyaya philosophy? So, this is a very direct question from what we have learned so far. So, it says, or it asks us to recognize the correct sequential order of a comprehensible sentence, and you have the options akanksha, yogyata, tatparya and sannidhi, and we have to choose the correct answer from the options. So, as we have already discussed, the first, if we consider the sequential order of a comprehensive sentence, the first thing is akanksha. We have already discussed about it in the video. Then comes yogyata, and then we have sannidhi, which is also called as asati, and then we have option C, that is tatparya. So, A, B, D and C. So, A, B, D and C is option, A, B, D and C is option B. So, the right answer for this question is option B. So, another question from June 2020, and the question goes like this. In order to authenticate the environmental values as advocated by our ancestors, a scholar cites examples from Vedas. The means of knowledge used by him or her in terms of interlogic will be called, and you have the options Anumana, Pardi, Shabda and Upamana. So, when we consider this particular question, the knowledge that this scholar has got is from Vedas, and that is in the written format. Like, So, if we consider Shabda as we have discussed in the video, we said that Shabda is verbal testimony and it is the knowledge that we are getting through words, okay, the knowledge that we are getting through words, and it can be both in a written format and it can be also transmitted orally. And one more thing that we have to consider is the source should be authentic. When we consider Shabda, the knowledge that we are getting, the source from which we are getting the knowledge should be valid, authentic. So, that is about Shabda, and if we consider this question, we can say that this is an example of Shabda or verbal testimony, because the scholar has cited examples from Vedas. So, he has got this knowledge that is through words, that is in written format, and also the source is authentic as well. So, the knowledge through words, that is Shabda. So, that is option C. So, the right answer for this question is option C. Another question, Anil's participation in classroom is indifferent. His parents do not find him to be active either, but his performance in examinations ranges from being good to outstanding. Therefore, he must be studying privately in a clandestine way. This is an example of which kind of pramana? So, if you consider this question, it gives you an example and we have to find out what kind of pramana that is mentioned in this particular question, and this was asked in June 2020. And you have the options Upamana, Anumana, Anupalabdhi and Arthapati. We have already discussed all these pramanas in detail as well. So, if we consider this particular question, it is about a student, a boy whose name is Anil, and if we consider that particular guy, his participation in classroom is very indifferent. He participates in classroom indifferently, and at home also he is not that active. That is what we are getting, that is the information that we are getting when we consider Anil. When we observe Anil, he is not that an active kid at classroom, or even he is not that active at home as well. But when we consider the performance of Anil in his examinations, he always scores marks that ranges from good to outstanding. So, even though he behaves indifferently at class and he is not a kid who is very active at home as well, but still he is performing really good in his examinations. So, what we are saying here, therefore, he must be studying privately in a clandestine way. That means he must be studying silently, he must be studying alone. So, that is what we are assuming from the information that we have at our hand. So, what kind of a pramana which is mentioned here? Obviously, that is Arthapadi, implication. Why? We have a set of informations that are within ourselves, that we observed Anil and he is not that active at school, or even he is not that active at his home as well, but he is performing good, or he is performing excellently in his examinations. So, we are saying that okay, this kid is not that active, but he is performing really good in his exams. So, obviously, he might be studying lonely, he might be studying alone. So, this studying alone is not seen by ourselves. We haven't seen him studying alone, but from what we have at hand, from the informations and from the observations that we have at hand, we are making certain implications, certain postulations, right. So, from the set of circumstances, we are deriving a conclusion, or we are deriving a information, or we are deriving a knowledge. So, what we have at hand is about Anil, his characteristics and also his results. So, from that we are analyzing that okay, this person will be studying lonely, he will be studying silently, he will be studying alone. So, that is an implication that we are making out of the things or the informations that we have at our hand. So, this knowledge is derived by implication. So, it is derived from a set of circumstances using postulations and presumptions. So, the right answer for this question is option D, that is Arthapati, implication. So, in this video we have discussed about 6 different pramanas, and this is a very important topic from NET point of view. So, please do understand the difference between these pramanas, and happy learning. Thank you.